welcome back to Wounded on Sixes. Today we're going to be going over the Death Guard unit tier list, not to keep the stinky boys waiting any longer. This is going to be our last tier list video for a little bit, as we're going to be starting our 1,000 point list series here coming up, but I really wanted to get a chance to go over the Death Guard units. Wanted to try to make a little bit of a quicker video here for you all, so let's go ahead and jump right in with the list. So if you know how the tier lists go here on the channel, we have 5 categories: Windmill Slam, Good Choice, Decent, Fringe, and Dusty. Windmill Slam is the type of unit that can go basically in any list for the army. Good Choice is a unit that's pretty good in almost every list, but maybe not quite auto include and everything. Decent is units that are good in certain lists or certain detachments, but not great in others. Fringe is units that you don't really see a lot, especially on the competitive scene. Maybe they're things for like a casual game, things like that. And Dusty are just units that you don't really take onto the battlefield with you. So in terms of Death Guard, they don't really have a lot of Dusty units, so I'm excited to get going here. So first up, and not to be outdone, we have Mortarion. So Mortarion is an epic hero for 300 points. He's had an interesting run in 10th edition. When he first came out, he seemed lackluster. Then he was doing really well with 3 Plague Burst Crawler lists when the indirect fire in 10th edition was still funky. After the nerf, he kind of started to see a little less play, and now you basically just don't see a list without Mortarion. He just provides so much to the army. Rerolls to wound rolls of 1. He can turn off modifiers for units that are within 6 inches of him. He can be a beat stick for armies that cannot deal with Mortarion. He's 300 points. He has gone down in points a little bit here and there, but he is fantastic. And now that he deep strikes, like, you can choose to start him on the board. You could choose to start him in your opponent's deployment zone. I mean, there's just so many options with Mortarion. So to me, he's an absolute windmill slam. Coming up next, we have another epic hero, and Typhus for 80 points. And Typhus has been basically an auto include the entire edition. He's absolutely fantastic. He can go with both variants of the Terminators as well as poxwalkers, and he actually works really well in poxwalkers. You lose the ability to deep strike, but he can use his really good psychic ability, which is basically roll a d6. Anything higher than a 2, do a bunch of mortals to an enemy unit. If he kills units, he can bring back those poxwalkers. Like, he's just really good. He makes Death Shroud really good. I haven't really run him with Blight Lord Terminators this edition. Just hasn't really happened, but I'm sure he's pretty decent in there too. He does make them -1 to hit in the melee, so very good unit and highly recommend. I have not built a list this edition without him, so he's definitely also a windmill slam. So we're off to a very promising start here. We're going to move on to the regular characters now. We have the biologist Putrifier. The Putrifier is pretty decent. You're only going to be bringing him if you're bringing a Plague Marine heavy list, which is fine. He allows you to get a free grenade strat. He also allows you to get your lethal hits on all of your plague weapons on 5s. He can go into a Plague Marine unit with another character, which is really nice. So, you can double up on the characters. I like to bring him in a unit of 10 because you just get more attacks, so you're getting more lethals there. So I think he's a great choice. Next, we have the Chaos Lord for 65 points, and I gotta say, I don't think I've seen a regular Chaos Lord on the field. They can only go with Marines. It's 65 points. You can only get rerolls of hits of 1. He does have a little mortal wound thing that he can do, which is not bad, but honestly, I kind of think he's just a fringe choice or maybe just something casual. Next up, we have the Death Guard Chaos Lord in Terminator armor. 85 points here. I mean, again, not really something that you see out in the wild, not in any of the competitive lists for sure. Again, just re-rolling the hit rolls of 1. Same thing as the regular Chaos Lord, except he could go with the Terminator units. Again, I don't think I've ever seen it. You're probably always going to take Typhus or a Lord of Contagion or a Lord of Virulence. So I think this is a fringe choice as well. We're now going into the Death Guard Demon Prince, and this is the one without wings. And this is probably the better one just because it has the better ability of giving 6 up Feel No Pain to Death Guard infantry units. My biggest problem with Demon Prince units this edition has been they don't have loan up and they can't go in anything, so they can be targeted whenever. They do have an invul, they're pretty tough units, but this one is definitely better than the other one because it's only 160 points, and that 6 up Feel No Pain on some Terminators could be really good, especially in something like the Flyblown Host. I'm going to put this one in decent. Next one we have is the Death Guard Demon Prince with wings, and the Death Guard Demon Prince with wings is 195 points, and in my opinion, just not as good as the regular Demon Prince. He does have an ability to get to do battle shock test when he's on the charge. He can also give his big sword devastating wounds when he's on the charge, but he really relies on that. And he doesn't get much more movement for having wings, but he costs a whole lot more points. I don't really see one with wings, although I have one myself and I really enjoy it. So I'm going to place this one in fringe. It's really just coming into casual games with me myself. Next up, we have the Death Guard Icon Bearer, which is a pretty decent choice if you're bringing him in a Plague Marine heavy list. I suggest bringing him in a 10-man list so you could bring another leader and also take the most advantage of that +1 OC that it'll give them. Next, we have the Death Guard Sorcerer in Terminator armor, and this is a great choice. You'll see it in a lot of competitive lists, and that's because it's got 2 really relevant psychic powers that it can do. One can buff its psychic attacks, and the other one can reduce damage for the unit that it's leading, which both can be Death Shroud and Blight Lords. A fantastic choice for either. I like bringing in Blight Lords because it kind of does bring up what Blight Lords don't do, which is kill things very good and stay alive really long. After that, we have the Foul Blightspawn, and the Foul Blightspawn is another great choice if you're bringing a Plague Marine heavy list. It allows them to have fights first, and I like to bring the combo of the Biologist Putrifier and the Foul Blightspawn so that you are getting maximum damage out of those Plague Marine heavy lists. And I think a Plague Marine list, even just with one unit, should have these 2 leading them. They're fantastic and highly recommend. After that, we have the Lord of Contagion, and this guy is a beat stick. You can make him very, very deadly, especially in the Plague Company detachment. Fantastic in a unit of Death Shrouds, because he's allowing you to re-roll the hit roll in melee, which is awesome for getting maximum damage into your opponent and also getting the most out of your lethal hits, which only go off on the hit. So I think a Lord of Contagion is a good choice. Next up, we have his good friend, the Lord of Virulence, and also at 80 points, I think this is another slam dunk type of unit if you're bringing a Terminator heavy list particular, although I kind of think that the Lord of Contagion and Typhus are a little bit better than the Lord of Virulence. The Lord of Virulence is particularly good if you're bringing a Plague Burst Crawler heavy list, so I'm going to put it in good choice. But honestly, I think if you're bringing a Terminator heavy list, you probably want to go with the Lord of Contagion and Typhus. After that, we have the Bignic Plaguecaster at 65 points, and this is a decent option, especially if you want to do the Plaguecaster type Plague Marines in a Rhino spitting out flamers with the open top. I think that's a pretty decent option there. I don't know exactly how competitive it is. It's kind of hard to pull off, but I've tried it a few times, and it's not bad. I'm going to put this guy over in the decent category. We then have the Noxious Blightbringer for 45 points, and while a good looking model, it definitely doesn't have much play in any of the lists that I've seen, and it's basically been collecting dust for 2 editions for me. After that, we have the Plague Surgeon, who's 50 points, and Honestly, I think he's a little bit better than people give him credit for. He does bring back a bodyguard unit a turn, so he'll bring back a dead Plague Marine. And if you have Plague Marines holding down your like natural expansion objective, you really just want them to sit there and collect points for you. Then I think the Plague Surgeon's a pretty decent option because he can kind of make sure that you're keeping units on that objective and or keeping guys in the fight. So I'm going to put him as a decent option. After that, we have the Tallyman, and you're going to see the Tallyman in a lot of different lists because he generates a CP for the army. He's only 45 points. You will see him solo. I rarely will see him inside of a Plague Marine squad. He's usually like hanging out in the back just collecting CP, but he's in a lot of lists because that CP generation is important, so I'm going to put him in good choice. After that, we have the Plague Marines, and I'm pretty high on the Plague Marines. I think that they're a pretty good choice when you can consider that you can bring them in units of 5, units of 7, or units of 10. They're not super expensive. They have a lot of support with the characters um, th- that they can go with. So I think they're a good choice, especially if you got a couple of rhinos that you could drive them in and kind of get over the slowness of them. They can be pretty deadly, especially now with the fly-blown host as well. After that, we have some of my favorite models in the codex, but unfortunately, one of my least favorite data sheets in the codex, and that would be the Blight Lord Terminators, 155 points. I don't know if these guys could get any cheaper than what they currently are, but they are really not that great. Um, Although being cheap does help, I think the Flyblown host also helps. I think if it wasn't for Flyblown host, this would probably be a fringe choice, but I'm going to put it in decent. Moving along, we have Death Guard Cultists, and these are basically your run-of-the-mill cultists, except that they can spread Nurgle's Contagion, which is awesome. They also have a scout move. You're going to see these guys in a lot of competitive lists because they are cheap, they can score, they can scout, and then they can die. Or you can use them to hold down your back objective. I've seen that a lot too. So I think they're a good choice and a cheap option for Death Guard that's pretty elite. After that, we have the creme de la creme of the Codex, and that is the Death Shroud Terminators. These guys are the best melee infantry unit that we have, and now that they're really, really cheap, I mean, you can fit a lot of these guys in your list at 110 for 3, 220 for 6. Add in Typhus, add in any of the Lords and Terminator armor, and these guys can be hurting an opponent. I think they're fantastic, and I think that they're a windmill slam. I don't think that you're going to see a Death Guard list without them in it. After that, we have the Poxwalkers, and I think the Poxwalkers are okay. I don't think they're as good as the Cultists because they don't have the scout move outside of the Flyblown Host. Although in Flyblown Host, I think that they can be pretty effective because they are Death Guard infantry. But other than that, they're also pretty good with Typhus. If you bring a unit of 20, as I mentioned earlier, you can use Typhus's psychic ability to get some of them back, which could be super effective. Then if you add in the Plague Host ability to use a stratagem on them to bring some units back, they can also just stick around forever and provide Typhus a you can't kill me bubble without precision. With that said, I'm going to put them as a good choice at 50 points. Moving into Chaos Spawn of Death Guard, these guys are pretty fantastic as well. 70 points. They have one OC. They're basically just score machines. That's what they do. They're on the board to score, and they can also put up a pretty decent fight against infantry. They're not going to last super long, but if you can stick them in a corner, you can score proximity points with them. You can score points on objectives with them, and you can then sacrifice them to blunt a charge or stop some infantry from getting on an objective. It can be really effective and a really good way to get some contagion up in your opponent's face early. I think they're pretty good, and I'm going to put them as a good choice as you're going to see them in a lot of competitive lists as well. Next, we have the Death Guard Defiler moving into the vehicles. And honestly, the Death Guard Defiler is not something I don't think I've ever seen on a Death Guard table. I don't think I've seen it in a lot of competitive lists. There's a lot of different options in Death Guard for some anti-tank, and at 190 points, the Death Guard Defiler is not one of them. I think if you have one, it's been basically sitting on your shelf. After that, we have the Death Guard Hellbrute, and the Death Guard Hellbrute did see a little bit of play at the beginning of the edition because it can basically give a unit contagion that it hits with one of its attacks, which is pretty good, especially considering the changes to the Plague Company and being able to add another, debuff in the contagion. However, I don't really see this unit a lot at 130 points. I don't think it provides enough anti-tank to be something that you bring, even with that pretty decent ability. Um, you're not really going to see it in a lot of lists, although I think it's a fun, fluffy unit in a narrative campaign or a casual game, so I'm going to put that in the fringe category. After that, we have the Death Guard Land Raider, 240 points. And I can honestly say I don't think I've seen a Death Guard Land Raider on the table. I'm sure some players do use it, but for the most part, people are transporting their Plague Marines and Rhinos, and their Terminators are coming down from Deep Strike. So I don't really know why you'd bring the Land Raider. I guess to bring some anti-tank in your transport, that could be okay. The problem is you can't fit 10 Terminators inside of the Land Raider, so that definitely hurts it. You can put some Death Shroud in there and fit a whole unit in there, but honestly, I think if you're bringing this, it's definitely for more casual games. It's pretty expensive at 240 points, and you have a lot of other things to pay for in the army. After that, we have the Death Guard Annihilator. And the Death Guard Annihilator is a decent option for anti tank. I like to bring quad las cannons with it. It can be a pretty decent, cheap tank option at 130 points for four las cannon shots. I like it, and I think that if you're looking for cheap yet effective anti tank, the Death Guard Annihilator is pretty decent. After that, we have the Predator Death Guard Destructor, and I think the Destructor has a little bit more play. It's the same points, but I really like the autocannon on it. It can be a real beat stick against some infantry, and you can also put las cannons on the sponsons, so you can kind of have like this elite infantry plus anti-tank weapon on there for 130 points. You're going to see these in a lot of lists, and I think there's a reason for that, and I think it's because it's very, very versatile. So I think we're going to put that into good choice. After that, we have the Fetid Blow Drone, and I'm a big fan of the Fetid Blow Drone. It's only 90 points. It can fall back and charge, which is really nice. It has a lot of different weapon options. You could bring a flamer, you can bring a heavy weapon, you can bring a melee weapon. These guys are really good at covering the flanks. They move 10, so they're one of the fastest units and one of the fastest way to get contagion out into the middle of the board. And I think that if you're going to bring in Death Guard, you're going to want to bring one of these or two of them, honestly. And I build a lot of lists with these guys as well, so I'm going to put them in a good choice. We're now going to take a look at the Mephitic Blight Haulers. These guys they're just okay. They're not a great anti-tank option because their tank hunter ability doesn't work on monsters. So larger demons or Tyranids you're gonna have a real problem taking them down with this because they don't get the +1 to wound. They're better in units of 3, I think, because you get to increase the firepower. You get more missiles, more melta. But 3 can be cumbersome to move around. They're probably your tank option of last resort. They got a lot of weapons. They can be okay. They've gotten a little better with the fly blown host, but if you ask me, this is probably a fringe option, borderline decent. I'm going to drop them in decent, but it's probably pushing it. You're not going to see this in any competitive list. Next, we have the Plague Burst Crawler, and this used to be the premier anti-tank of the Death Guard. It's not anymore. There's a lot of options, especially in the ally category, that a lot of Death Guard players use. But this has seen some play. It used to get a lot of play with the Mortarion Indirect Bomb. The problem I see with it is that the entropy cannons are only 24 inches. They're strength 10, so like they're barely wounding most tanks and vehicles on 4s, so that could be problematic. They're really good if you bring multiples, but they're 180 points, kind of expensive, but you're going to see these in lists from time to time. They're definitely a casual favorite, but I can see some competitive play from here, here and there. I'm going to put this in the decent category. Next, we have the Chaos Death Guard Rhino, and this is going to be transporting our Plague Marines, moving them around the board, moving 10 inches, move blocking for us. It self repairs every turn. It can kind of stick around. It's got a couple of weapons on it, but nothing to write home about. But its biggest goal is to just get our Plague Marines out there. It also has a open top too, so you can fire from it as well, or at least get 2 shots from it. So that's pretty good. Yeah, it's a decent option. I like to play it. If you're bringing Plague Marines, you're almost going to be bringing 2 or 3 of these. I think it's a really good option. So we're going to put that in good choice. Last and certainly least, we have the Miasmic Malignifier. Fortifications are just not taken. 115 points for a fortification that, can spread contagion, can give you cover, can make you -1 to hit if you're wholly within 6 inches, but I don't think you're going to see this in competitive play or casual, and that's why it's going to go into Dusty. So there you go. There's been our Death Guard unit tier list. Let me know what you think about this list down below. Go ahead and leave a like, and please go ahead and subscribe if you haven't yet. We're trying to get up to 500 subscribers, and we're getting there quick. We thank you so much. So please come back for some more Wounded on Sixes.